Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, August 26, 2021. My name is Emma Vigland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Orville Vernon Burton and Armand Derfner, authors of Justice Deferred, Race and the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, there has been at least one explosion near the Kabul airport after warnings that attacks could be coming, as thousands still attempt to flee Afghanistan before the U.S.'s August 31st withdrawal deadline. We don't know the number of dead and injured thus far, but an ISIS affiliate is suspected to be involved, but that's not known concretely yet either. While evacuations are still underway, there are still around 1,500 Americans in Afghanistan, with some in communication with the U.S. to leave and some not. At least 250,000 Afghans who worked with the U.S. have yet to be evacuated as well. In the U.S., coronavirus hospitalizations hit 100,000 for the first time since January, with the highest concentration in the less vaccinated South, least too, as COVID cases in children are also surge. Johnson & Johnson is reporting that a second dose of its one-shot coronavirus vaccine provides stronger protection, and Pfizer and Moderna report similar studies for their third shot. Biden will likely approve boosters after 6 months shortly, but a reminder that a great majority of people in poorer nations still have not received one shot, or close to it. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott announced an executive order banning vaccine mandates, regardless of Pfizer's recent full FDA approval, after an executive order of his that only applied to vaccines without full FDA approval. So he's shifting those goalposts along with anti-vaxxers. What a guy. In Greece, wildfires rage across the country, part of the 500-plus wildfires that have broken out in the country in recent weeks as the Mediterranean region faces record high temperatures due to the climate crisis. And lastly, nearly 90% of pandemic rental assistance money has not yet been distributed, with less than 20% of the 2.8 million households that applied for aid having gotten any. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Sam is out today, but we have got a great show for you. The process of writing the reconciliation bill is underway. We have people like Bernie Sanders fighting to keep the $3.8 trillion framework intact. Sinema and Manchin want to cut it down because they just like to cut things for the sake of it. And that is going to take a while to unfold. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork that's happening right now and just writing. And then we should know in a few weeks what the final version or what the contours of the final version will entail. But for now, a lot of what we're still talking about is Afghanistan and coronavirus, of course, because the Delta variant is running rampant throughout the country. No signs of slowing down, especially in areas that are much less vaccinated than other areas of the country. And in Michigan, we learned, of course, that there was the first sentencing of the right-wing suspect, or I guess now convicted, attempted kidnapper of Gretchen Whitmer. So there's a lot of things going on there. And there have been anti-mask, anti-COVID protests there for quite a while, even at the beginning of the pandemic. But There was an anti-mask protester testifying at the County Board of Commissioners in Michigan yesterday. And these parents are very concerned about their children wearing masks. Well, usually they're using it as a proxy for their own outrage about having to wear masks and the pandemic not magically being over, because like children, if they don't get what they want immediately and doing it the way that they want it, they're going to throw a tantrum. And throw a tantrum this man did. You'll see here that he clearly does not perceive himself as the villain, and he threatens to do bad things while insisting he is a good person. And the other people in the room are good people. Newsflash. You're not inherently good if you do bad things. Your actions define who you are. But warning, he screams a bit, so you may want to turn down your headphones. Here is this man at this Michigan meeting.
And Dan Vanderswag.
That's my father-in-law right there, speaking on behalf of his grandkids. You with that diaper on your face, if he farted right now, could you smell it? That's how stupid this is. We're all playing games here with people's lives, and I'm sick of it. I represent all these hardworking guys that couldn't be here today to take off work to put up with this BS that you guys are putting down. And there's hell coming. There's hell coming, and I'm not doing it to threaten anybody. But there's a lot of good guys out there ready to do bad things soon. Watch what's coming. These mandates are against the Nuremberg codes. The first one states voluntary informed consent. Are you a Nazi? What is it? You're gonna they sent my dad off to Vietnam and fight for the country, but you're going to tell him to wear a mask?
Sir,
I appreciate the fact that I can't control myself. There's a lot of other guys that control that can't control themselves.
Talk to me.
That's why they're not here right now.
Somebody.
I have nothing else to say. Do what's right. There's a lot of bad things coming.
That's all the in-person public comment. We do have 11 current Zoom.
Yeah, that was a thunderous cheer behind him. Right. So good job alerting people and announcing yourself that you're going to commit terrorism.
Yeah,
it's
the
helpful.
whole informed consent thing is difficult with people who refuse any information that's provided to them.
Well, you know that he got all of his information from anti-vax memes, right? Because he opened with the point about diapers and farting, which we've really heard a little bit or a lot from these anti-vaxxers. They seem to use that quite frequently and think it's a really salient point.
Well, also the fixation on them being like Nazi victims, I think is a bit revealing too.
Well, yeah. So, right. He immediately goes to the Nuremberg codes. I don't know necessarily how that applies here, but it really does say something about the psychology of some of these anti-mask, anti-vaxxers, that they jump to Holocaust analogies in order to make their point, because that really shows how deep the victim complex is and how deeply seated it is. They go to the most extreme example in modern history of brutality, of genocide, of unfathomable suffering to describe the inconvenience of them, in their own words, putting a diaper on their face, a cloth covering over their nose and mouth. Like, there is really no sense of proportionality because the aggrievement is that entrenched and that strong, that pungent, if we want to keep going down this diaper road, right? I don't actually want to.
And like this is about who this guy's media sources are and the kinds of groups this guy is percolating in. Like this is being stoked for basically primary purposes for the Republican Party. This is how they're positioning themselves based on who can be the most aggrieved about trying to deal with a pandemic as a government. And I think that, I think one of these quote unquote good guys is going to do a bad thing. And I think it's being completely stoked on by the Republican Party.
And the media sources too, right? So you, as you say,
right? I mean, well, they're obviously part of.
They're
the
working
Party,
hand in hand, and it's helpful. It's helpful. So to bring it back, it's helpful for them to bring it back to this point I've been trying to make. As you say, this is a strategic decision made by media people and coming from right-wing think tanks, coming from right-wing leaders, to energize people on that level. Like, as you see, that man's anger is genuine. His sense of entitlement and his sense of victimhood is very, very real, and that engages him on an organic level. And there's nothing like a sense of complete victimization in order to engage people on the local level in politics. He's going to his meeting and he's screaming, and God damn it, he's going to vote for the furthest right politician in the primary. He's going to get involved in his local school board elections. He's going to get involved in state politics. And, you know, maybe he'll commit terrorism too.
Well, let's be clear about what the problem with the right is about responding to COVID. It's that they can't force workers to go make money for capitalists. Like, that's the big rub. And I wouldn't be surprised if you look at a lot of these guys and they're in like a certain amount of debt for a business enterprise that they really need like things to get back to normal.
Right.
I think that's motivating a awful lot of this. When you hear, and I don't know what this guy's background is, but I think a lot of this anti-mask stuff that's absolutely unconcerned with the safety of workers is motivated by that level, the entrepreneurial class's economic anxiety.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'll add a really facile point. Perhaps their fixation with diapers is because they are babies themselves. To add to Matt's excellent point, I'll make my stupid one. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by the authors of Justice Deferred, Race and the Supreme Court, Orville Vernon Burton and Armand Derfner. We'll be right back. Hello, we are back, and I would like to welcome to the program Orville Vernon Burton and Armand Derfner. Thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, so your book, I really appreciated your book because honestly, there's too much hagiography embedded in the way that we talk about the Supreme Court in this country, whether it be Brown v. Board or Roe v. Wade, right? We're talking a lot about landmark cases that protect rights in our collective history, but your book really does show how these periods of advancement were certainly a minority in the history of the Supreme Court. So let's just start there, if we could. What is the true history of the Supreme Court in this country?
The problem is it was terrible for a long time during almost all the 19th century, including after the Reconstruction Amendments changed the Constitution. In the early part of the 20th century, it started to get better, and especially during the period from the 1930s to the 1970s. And unfortunately, since the 1970s, it's been heading backwards, and recently it's been heading backwards at a really, really fast pace. A friend of mine said, I guess like the old takeoff on the old Clint Eastwood movie, it's the bad, the good, and the ugly.
Right.
And I'd like to add, though, that the history's not over. This is one of the important things I think we've done, is to do the long view of the Supreme Court and the history. So where we are now grew out of where we were, and where we're going will come out of where we've been. And I think that's important to remember, that this is an evolving history that changes every day. And secondly, I think it's important to remember the Supreme Court is one of the three branches of government. So there are other ways to get things done and change things in the United States that need to be changed. Right.
So I guess, your book kind of divided up the history of the Supreme Court pre-1930, post-1970, right? In terms of there was that brief reprieve where there were some really important decisions made, but the early history of the Supreme Court upheld a lot of technical legality of brutal treatment of a lot of groups, including Native Americans, as we were taking this country and expanding our through colonialism and our territories. So their property rights, for example. Talk a bit about the Supreme Court's role in stripping Native Americans of their property or of their land and their own rights in the eyes of the United States government.
Right. There were a few cases, as you say, in the early days, but then as the country moved westward, even from in the 1830s, Georgia determined to take the Indians' land. They wanted the Indians' land, they just didn't want the Indians there. And the Supreme Court had several sort of decisions looking in different ways. By the time of the late 19th century, when we were really putting the Indians away, the court just looked the other way. And there's a case that we talk about called the Lone Wolf case, Lone Wolf versus Hitchcock. It's been called the Dred Scott of Indian law. So the Supreme Court, at least until very recent times, just aided and abetted the destruction of Indian life. In more recent times, it's a little more iffy. And in fact, about the last case we end with in chapter 12 is a case involving whether Indian tradition, Indian identity can endure.
Right. And I guess, what was this 1823 decision where SCOTUS basically kind of set this ball in motion about Native rights or the lack thereof? Talk a little bit about how that framework was set.
First they said, well, the Indians are a separate nation. Then in another case, they said, well, they're a dependent nation, so we don't have to pay attention to them. And in fact, they said since white people, Europeans, quote, discovered the land, that's where the ownership comes. And in one of those early cases, there were two competing claims to land. One came from the Indians and one came from one of the new U.S. governments. And the Supreme Court said in one of those cases, well, the Indians really didn't have title. They didn't own anything. And I think that was the beginning of the long slide downward. Vernon, you can talk about the Trail of Tears.
We can go that direction if you want to, but one of the things we looked in the historical context was actually because so much of the book does deal with African Americans, because so many of the cases on race come out of slavery, particularly, and then later Jim Crow. But the vote on the Indian removal and the treaties was so much a sectional vote. Particularly most of what would become the Confederate states voted almost unanimously for it. It's interesting, Davy Crockett, who we think of as an Indian fighter, actually voted against it as a Whig. But the other thing to think about in dealing with Native Americans as opposed to African Americans who wanted to be a part once they were here and, not having been captured at that point, but here wanted the equal justice under the law, who wanted to be a part of the United States, equal citizens. Native Americans were asking for sovereignty, and they were treated as a different nation. So there's a different approach there, and sort of in both cases, the Supreme Court worked against the wishes of the groups of people.
Right,
Yeah,
and I know most.
I just want to add one little thing.
Sure.
Supreme Court does get credit, or almost credit, for a decision that would have gone in the right direction. In 1830, the Supreme Court ruled against Georgia being able to exercise jurisdiction over the land that the tribes held. The problem was Georgia said, "The heck with that. We're not going to pay any attention." And President Andrew Jackson said, "No, we're not going to make Georgia comply." So the Supreme Court issued a good decision, and then it just went nowhere.
And the later case, too, of the burial in Sioux City of a Native American veteran is an interesting case in terms that involves Harry Truman, who was very much as president in a number of instances, including with African Americans, because he was a veteran, went ahead and had him buried at Arlington. But there, the Supreme Court, a little late, but made a good ruling as well.
So, yes, I know your book focuses a lot on Black people in this country and how the Supreme Court really upheld much of, the brutality that we learn about to this day, right? Dred Scott's the most infamous example. But I just wanted to touch on the Native American point, because so much of that history collectively is kind of erased from when we talk about our government's complicity in it, right? It's treated with passivity, when the reality is that these were policy decisions and that these were court decisions too.
Exactly, and they set the path for how Native Americans have been treated since. As I said, it's interesting to us because the book begins with Native American cases, and I believe the last case deals with what Armand alluded to, the baby girl adoption case, where actually a white couple in Charleston had adopted a Native American child, and the father then sued for.
And when you talk about forgetting the past, that's one of the big themes of the book. That there's we use the term a national amnesia, where we just seem to forget about the worst of the role that government played in creating the role that government played in dealing with Indians. And so it's almost as if erasing the past is a critical part of our whole history.
In fact, I like to do the quote, if I can get it right, from the Virginia judge who actually convicted Richard and Mildred Loving of what he called unlawful, quote, miscegnation, and said that, and if I've got his quote right, it's Almighty God created the races white, black, yellow, Malay, and red, and he placed them on separate continents. He therefore ruled that God did not intend for the races to mix. And so literally the Supreme Court has dealt with issues involving all these different groups. And that's what we tried to do as well and tell a coherent story. So it is interesting, as you say, that usually the Native American story, let alone the Japanese or the Chinese or different groups, have not been put together in this way, particularly over time. And that's one of the things we try to do. And we think that's one of the strengths of the book.
I think so too. Orville, I think you might be getting some emails. We're hearing that a little bit on the broadcast, just so you know. So, but I wanted then to move, I guess, to the Supreme Court's decisions in Dred Scott, and we talk about the Armistead decision, which is definitely an outlier, right? Most of these cases were Dred-like, even though, as I mentioned, a lot of the time, I think Dred Scott is treated like, oh, this is the worst of the Supreme Court. This was an outrageous decision, at least in my recollection of, say, like my high school history. That's what we were taught. But this was very much in keeping with a lot of decisions made by the Supreme Court during that time. Talk a little bit about the totality of that dynamic.
Go ahead, Armand. I was setting down my email. So,
well, here's the thing: the Dred Scott decision came along at a time when slavery was accepted. It was part of half the country, and there were provisions in the Constitution to protect slavery. So, in a sense, as bad as it was, that was the tune of the times. To my mind, the worst part, a worse part, is what happened afterwards. Because once you had the Constitution saying that everybody's supposed to get equal protection, and slavery was over, and the badges of slavery are supposed to be removed, and Congress is supposed to make sure that that all happens, then the decisions of the Supreme Court that went against the interests of minorities, especially of African Americans, are really disgraceful. To my mind, I think maybe the worst case is the cases involving the disfranchisement. The Southern states, starting in 1890, just used every dishonest trick and knew it was dishonest and said it was dishonest to make sure that blacks couldn't vote. So, for example, in both Alabama and Mississippi, they adopted new constitutions that dropped the number of African Americans who were registered to vote from like 200,000 to 3,000. And they said what they were doing. They said it openly. And the Supreme Court approved it the Supreme Court had half a dozen cases in 10 years. And in case after case, they said, oh, that's okay. It's what the 15th Amendment allows. Just an absolute disgrace.
And what they did, of course, is something we're actually dealing with now, and that is the neutral. They claim that it is neutral language. So as the Virginia senator sort of said, as long as we don't say we're disfranchising black people, but use what looks like neutral language to do it, that is poll taxes, literacy laws, understanding clause, grandfather clause, you can get away with it. But I would add about Dred Scott, I don't want to get off too lightly, though I agree completely with Armand. But what Judge Taney did was go one step further. And particularly as a historian, I'll say he ignored history. He said that African Americans had never been a part of the United States as citizens and recognized as such. But even in North Carolina, free African Americans voted at the time of the Constitution and did up until the 1830s, I believe to 1835. So I think that's important. And it's clear that, as we show in the book, he was in cahoots with where he was going with this argument and had made arrangements sort of behind the scenes to know where it was going and to line it up, which was a great decision. And it was enough that it made a difference so that someone like Abraham Lincoln and all others pretty much in the North and other places who had perhaps been against slavery. It literally, as Lincoln said, it says now that you can have slavery in Illinois, and it made a drawing line, I think, in terms of the nation that really led to the Civil War. I realized that the Supreme Court's intention was probably defusing a situation, but I would argue that Dred Scott brought it to a boil, and that's the reason for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, this second Reconstruction, or I guess it's the first Reconstruction, but the second founding, as Eric Foner has titled it in his latest book. And I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that happens is that the judges in the Supreme Court after the Civil War that Armand is talking about weren't able to adjust and accept the premise and what the 13th and 14th Amendment were all about, which was ensuring those citizenship rights of former slaves and their equality of treatment under the law.
Yes. So, I mean, you talk about working in cahoots, right, with this Dred Scott decision, with political actors basically trying to maneuver in a way. There still is this, in my view, perception of justices as like priests, almost unimpeachable, working from a set ideology, even today when it's nakedly clear that they're applying political framework, a political framework to their decisions. So you're really saying even back then, even when justices weren't consuming CNN in the morning and they weren't isolated from the news in the way that the founders kind of set it out to be, isolated from politics, that they were making these political decisions actively.
Yes, really so. I think one of the big differences, and we try to discuss it, of course, we sort of now really vet, or the people who are appointing them vet, so they don't get surprises about the judges' rulings as much, though I do have some hopes that you can't vet everything, and the law itself teaches people, and that people can learn from the law, particularly when it's put into the historical perspectives, which is partly what we tried to do here. And one of the most recent examples is the case that Armand and I predicted. In fact, we're sort of proud of this, the Brnovich case out of Arizona recently, where Judge Alito says that, today is not like 1982 when the Voting Rights Act was renewed, and then when Judge Roberts did the same thing with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. And we have sort of laid out in the book, particularly how in several cases, including that important case, that whether it was deliberate or not, parts of the arguments by the judges have left out key parts when they are making their arguments that would go exactly the opposite of the decision they've made.
One of the things that we tried to do is to demystify, just like what you're talking about, is to demystify the process. And one of the problems is that judges often write their opinions using technical doctrines or technical language. And that makes it hard for the ordinary person who's not a lawyer or not a scholar to understand what they're doing. And so what we've tried to do is to put into plain language what's going on in some of these so-called technical decisions. And for example, Vernon mentions the Brnovich case that was just decided on the 1st of July of this year, I think. And one of the, we have a footnote saying this case is coming down the pike, but that's a perfect example of where the court is hiding behind today's court is hiding behind technical doctrines that it is getting absolutely wrong. And in fact, they're really manipulating and burying a precedent that the Burger Court, which is a conservative court, Burger Court created a precedent called the Arlington Heights Rule that was designed to help make it possible to prove when there's discrimination. And the Supreme Court majority in the Brnovich case just buried that, and issued a ruling that was flatly contrary and never said a word. And frankly, it's just dishonest.
Right. And I mean, you touched on it a bit, but I was hoping you could expand on the aftermath of the Civil War, the court's kind of really active upholding of white supremacy and affirming the legality of separate but equal, overturning convictions of white men who had lynched and murdered black people, as of course the Jim Crow South was emerging, and their complicity in that. I'm hoping that you could give us some more context and flesh that out for us.
Yeah, and I think it really was more complicit than people can imagine. And part of it was that they could not move from the Constitution as it was, say in 1860 or 56 or 58, when everything was basically left with the states. It's the way the Union came together. And that's changed by the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment. I like to say that Abraham Lincoln basically, with those three amendments, took our mission statement, the Declaration of Independence, and put it into our rule book, the Constitution. And I think judges could not move, many of the judges at least, just could not bring themselves to move beyond the idea that these things were relegated to the states. That is the old idea of federalism. At the same time, in the early part of Reconstruction, there are some very interesting cases that set the precedent that should have been used. You'd have had a different outcome. Certainly the Plessy v. Ferguson, which ranks right behind Armand's argument that Williams is the most disgraceful case, perhaps, but there was a clear case that Armand can certainly talk about. He's done research on it, and several historians have now written about, where Catherine Brown is in fact assured that she can sit in the first class seats with whites integrated. And yet the court ignores that. You have some good rulings by Chief Justice Chase, but at the same time, those were at lower courts when they were overseeing lower courts, but they're there for precedent in a number of instances. So it really doesn't become clear until there's sort of a series of cases that really are disgraceful. And Armand, we might want to even rethink, they may be the most disgraceful when you get back to the sort of civil rights cases and the Colfax murder and things like that sort of set up what comes later.
Yeah, Vernon talked about how the court in the 19th century was deferring to the states, and the worst things that the states wanted to do, although the whole point of the 14th and the 15th and 15th Amendments was to give the federal government power to make the states, those states that wanted to do wrong, to make them do right. And it was the Supreme Court that couldn't get used to that idea in the 19th century. And now today, what we see is the court again saying, oh, the states have to be given primacy in areas where some of these states are just trying to do the wrong thing, and the Supreme Court is throwing out Congress's efforts to prevent that from happening.
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of this selective application of when states' rights apply and when they don't, and the selectivity is often in the direction of upholding racist structures. So, I mean, we have that reprieve in the Thurgood Marshall era where we have these cases, right? But, these important landmark cases, and I'm hoping you guys can touch on that a bit. But then, what's so important is post-1970, we return to courts upholding, and have for quite a while, courts upholding some of these racist laws. And we're in the throes of it today with voter suppression laws. So touch on that a bit, right? How the Thurgood Marshall era was one that did have important cases that moved the country in the direction and showed what a court that leaned more to the left could provide. But then, of course, where we're at now in this era after that.
It wasn't so much.
Like to say, Okay, briefly, I'll turn it to you then. In fact, one of the things that reminded, we like to say that Thurgood Marshall, who during this period, sort of the native racialist, turns it around, that he hardly lost a Supreme Court case when he was the attorney for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and NAACP. He hardly, lost a case before the Supreme Court, and then he's appointed to the Supreme Court, and then he finds himself pretty much on the losing side of most of the important race decisions after a while. And there is a description in the book that I love a lot that sort of puts it into context. And I'll turn it to Armand and let him do it, but very quickly. You remember when Thurgood Marshall was being confirmed, Strom Thurmond, the senator from South Carolina, who'd been the Dixiecrat candidate in 1948, states' rights, who had filibustered against civil rights laws, just gave Marshall a horrible time when he is being confirmed, like your communist, things like this. So it's the 1980, and his best friend is William Brennan. And of course, Thurgood Marshall is a giant of a man, and Brennan is a small fella. And he comes up after the Reagan Revolution, 1980, Brennan to Marshall, and he said, is it true, can it be true that instead of Ted Kennedy, the civil rights supporter, chair of the Judiciary Committee is now Strom Thurmond? And Marshall puts his arm, drapes it over him, the two turn away and walk to their office. It's like two great civil rights warriors, fighters for equal justice, going into their last battles. But it's really symbolic, I think. And Armand, you might want to try to put that in the context of the cases and that brief period of the Warren Court to the end, and then what happens, the turnaround.
Yeah, I think I would characterize the Warren Court not so much as a leftist court, left-right, but as a court that took the Constitution and the civil rights laws seriously. We talk about the difference in judges or in anybody being on, do you take certain laws to be the most they can mean and interpret them broadly, or the least they can mean? And in the 19th century, the Supreme Court took the great constitutional amendments and the civil rights laws of Congress for the least they could mean. And they drained all the content out of them. In the period starting in the 30s and in the Warren Court, what they did was a do-over of what should have happened in Reconstruction. And so the Charles Evans Hughes, who was Supreme Court Chief Justice before Warren, and Warren, a couple of others, in those days, in those 40 years or so, they read the constitutional amendments and the civil rights laws broadly and gave them real meaning. And what's happened since that time is that it's going back in the other direction. And the interesting thing is that in the court under Chief Justice Warren Burger, which was the 70s and most of the 80s, it was I would call it a moderately conservative court. It was definitely conservative, but there were some pro-civil rights decisions, and the slowing down was, to use that word, moderate again. Since William Rehnquist became Chief Justice, and under him, and since that time, it's been galloping to the right. And this court, as well as the Rehnquist court, are reading the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments and the civil rights laws for as little as they can mean, and draining them of all possible meaning.
Well, I should have said the Warren Court, and just when Marshall was arguing all these cases in front of the court before he was appointed, then you talk about that kind of cruel irony of then progress kind of being slammed to a halt once he's an associate justice on the Supreme Court. But
and I want to just add, though, one thing as a historian that I think is important. We don't give enough credit that Armand and I sort of discovered this work to Chief Justice Hughes, who actually ran against Woodrow Wilson for president, was on twice. And one of the things he did, instead of what had happened previously when Alabama said, no, we're not doing, that it's okay. Literally, Hughes says, let's look at the evidence ourselves. Let's look at the historical evidence ourselves instead of just taking what the courts there have said. And that made a huge difference. And I have hopes that maybe if we get the record to people, they will pay attention to the actual historical record even today, and maybe that can make a difference again.
Let me just throw one thing more in about Hughes, who's a great Chief Justice. He said, he started the first case involving desegregation. And in that case, he said, I believe in federalism, but states have not just states' rights, but states' responsibilities. And that was the beginning of the road toward Brown versus the Board of Education.
Mm. So it sounds like you may have answered this question already, but I kind of want to ask a philosophical question about the Supreme Court. Like, because of the majority of its history being so deferential to conservative concepts, is the Supreme Court an inherently conservative institution?
Vernon, I'd like to hear what you got to say about that.
Well, I think so, but conservative doesn't mean bad. There are values in the Declaration of Independence and certainly the Constitution worth conserving, and rule of order is, the rule of law is important. I think it's a constant struggle with the idea of freedom and liberty. On the one hand, you'll have anarchy. On the other, you have tyranny and authoritarianism. And, what is the answer? I think it's what we face today. Exactly. What is the answer? And I think one of the hopes is these rules that we have, but they have to be applied fairly and not with the political agenda that so many people have. For me, it's hard to believe that we don't want people to vote in a democracy. It's like we're going back in time in history as we move forward to universal first manhood and then all people, women included, voting, that now we want to stop people from voting. It just doesn't make much sense. Now, and we should say this book is not just about voting. There's a lot more about race than voting, but it's so relevant right now. I think that's where our minds are as much as any place else. So yes, I think it's conservative. That doesn't have to mean bad. Chief Justice Hughes is a great example. He literally, his father was an American Baptist minister, and those values were important to him. And he tried to live that kind of thing. Though he was a conservative man, he tried to do what was right. And he was, in Armand and my opinion, one of the great Chief Justices, and not heralded as much as he should be for those decisions that he led the court to in terms of turning around all those years of Jim Crow and the nadir of race relations that led to the Warren Court. Armand, what's your take on it?
Well, it's hard to say. To a certain extent, maybe a large extent, the Supreme Court is usually in tune with the view of the country as a whole. And so in the late 19th century and early 20th century, when the court was so bad, well, the whole country was so bad on race. Jim Crow was widely accepted. In fact, this is really the first time that I can think of where the court has been seriously out of sync, because I think most of the country is really in favor of achieving equal justice and equal rights. And the Supreme Court, I believe, today is out of sync. And that's what's unusual, I think, today.
Yeah. And to follow up just a moment about that, it does change, I think, a lot. And there are other decisions, as Armand talked about, and he's had great examples if we talk through this book, of where the court reads broadly certain rights, but then is reading the least they can, particularly on rights related to race and equal justice and equal opportunity. And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, there are three branches of government. So in 1980, when I got involved as an expert witness in voting rights case, it was because of a Supreme Court case that we have a chapter on this, on purpose and effect, and how that's used by the court. Then in 1982, Congress in a bipartisan way stepped up as another branch of government and amended the Voting Rights Act so that the Supreme Court decision actually was seen as out of sync and wrong with what the country wanted. So there are other ways too that that's why I think that perhaps the Supreme Court is conservative in terms of the three branches of government, but that doesn't mean that conservatism itself is a bad thing and can lead to decisions about justice. And we can see that in some of the dissenting opinions, which will go down, I think, as some of the great dissenting opinions like Justice Harlan's that we've gotten since Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor now are going to be things that will be studied for years to come in terms of our Supreme Court decisions and the history of the United States and what they mean.
Well, we're out of time, unfortunately, but Vernon Burton, Armand Derfner, you can read their book, Justice Deferred, Race in the Supreme Court. Thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank
you. We really appreciate you taking us seriously. Good question.
Oh, well, I loved having you on. Thank you both so much.
Book a thorough reading.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, we're going to head into a quick break, and when we come back, we'll wrap things up. We are back. I want to thank those gentlemen for that wonderful discussion. Apologies for some of the email noises, but you know, like they were great sports about it. So really appreciate their time today. Now, let's turn to the living embodiment of that meme, the worst person you know just made a great point. So, look, James Carville has a vested interest in defending Joe Biden. This is his kind of guy. This is the kind of centrist Democrat that Carville believes is the only way to win. But he decided to, when speaking with Brian Williams, call out a bit of the media coverage about Biden's Afghanistan withdrawal. Let's take a listen to the first clip of this, and then there's a bit of a back and forth.
A vote. Well, first of all, there's no elegant way to lose a war. We lost this war 15 years ago. All Joe Biden was doing is telling us what time it is. And the hysterical and stupid coverage of the mainstream press, it's been awful. Just read New York.
It's been awful. Let's watch the next part. This was divided up. But yeah, I mean, I was like, whoa.
It was lost 40 years ago, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that too. But I mean, he's right. He's right. The war was lost years and years ago, and the mainstream coverage and the hysteria behind it, he's absolutely accurate. I mean,
there's no reason we should expect a good withdrawal from a bloody and brutal and pointless occupation, like this, and dishonorable one. Like, you can't save that with the exit. You can't stick the landing after just. It's like hitting the tramp, like when you're diving off a diving board and you hit your head and like feet on the diving board and like hit the side of the pool, and then like, but the water, you hit the water.
Yeah, you didn't actually do the pose that you were supposed to do to get a 10 out of 10 on the dive. Like, no, dude, we're already bleeding from our head. We're not going to be able to win the competition at this point.
Right.
So let's hear what else Carville has to say on MSNBC.
I asked Claire, does Biden need more friends and more vocal friends in Washington to point all this out?
Well, first of all, it would be greatly benefited if the press would cover this accurately. And yes, you always have the amount of Democrats. And I can't tell you the number of phone conversations. I said, well, James, I mean, damn, man, you did the right thing by getting out, but it's going about it the wrong way. And I've said, do they teach a course at West Point or Annapolis or at Johns Hopkins on how to lose a war? No. There's no good way to lose a war. We lost this war. We lost it a long time before Joe Biden became president. All he's doing is getting us out of there. And I'm sorry, this is not the Battle of Midway, all right? This is a defeat. And we got to understand that as a country. Of course, we plowed right into this after we did Vietnam, after we did Iraq. Warren Buffett said the only thing people learn from history, people never learn from history. I hope that some of these images will cause us to take a deep breath before we go off on some other Wall Street Journal-sponsored adventure around the world.
I mean, what? I am shocked at every word I hear coming out of his mouth. Never expect him to make this point, but it's not just like, the problem isn't losing the war. The problem is war. The problem is imperialism. The problem is United States complete arrogance and bloodthirstiness and capitalistic ambitions that extend beyond the bounds of reality and beyond the bounds of humanity. Like, that is the true problem. And Carville would have no issue with any war that at the outset he found was just. But he's accurate that the blame does not fall on Biden, right? You can't expect a withdrawal from a bloody conflict. Like, no adequate coverage about the brutality in those 20 years, right? They downplaying it for the patriotic goals of the United States, not covering what we were doing there in terms of torture, and of course with Iraq it was 100 times worse. Not focusing on the crux of what this actually was, only focusing on and having humanitarian concern for the consequences of the withdrawal. No humanitarian concern before. So it really is completely contrived. And Carville is right. I never thought I'd say this again. We should pull up that meme of the worst person you know made the best point. Not actually, but that's what we had here. And I think it's important to have that context. This really is actually because of this manufactured outrage directed towards Biden by the media. This is hurting his poll numbers right now. And in conversations with people in my life, who like Biden, right? Normie Dems, I don't like how he's handling this. Well, Do you have a different solution in how this would be handled? No, but
yeah, I mean,
I don't like it.
Ben Shapiro says what if we just left a whole bunch and just so the reason that we couldn't start this withdrawal and air vacuum people out earlier is because it would have started then, right? It's that's what happens. Like the Pentagon actually studied this stuff.
Right. That's when the withdrawal would have begun.
And if you look at all these things, second guessing it, there's not a good alternative solution that doesn't have its own severe problems. Because, as Carville said, there's no good way to lose a war, which we lost. We lost this one, I mean, it's kind of Vietnam, we're losing.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we will see you tomorrow, Peacock audience. All right, we're good. What a show.
Hey, it looks good.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so the new overlays, how's it looking?
It's looking great. It might be causing some problems, so we might not be able to do it in the first half.
Oh, no.
But now it's good.
All right, well, enjoy it while it lasts, people. Matt, what happened on Left Reckoning, Laugh
Reckoning, where we talk about the politics of comedians.
I'm just still sweating with every email notification that came up. I just oh god, I hope this doesn't go on the whole time.
Last night on Left Reckoning, we had Chip Gibbons, who's a civil liberties journalist, also host of the Primary Sources podcast and the formerly active Still Spying podcast on FBI spying domestically. A really, really smart guy. Talked a whole bunch of things. Talked to Assange, Daniel Hale. We talked about the Nixon tapes from when the Pentagon Papers were released, and Kissinger was advising Nixon that whatever he wants to do to the New York Times, LBJ would support, because Nixon had those kind of connections. And we also finally talked about how to balance this thing where we all know that cops and the feds are cooperative in many ways with the right wing, but we also have this thing now where they're using informants in ways that looks kind of similar to how they entrapped Muslims post 9/11 and
with the Michigan thing.
Exactly. The informant budget is just massive, and I'm pretty sensitive to this. And Red Fawn Fallis was a water protector who was arrested in Dakota Access Pipeline for possession of a weapon that went against her parole, I believe. But that gun was planted on her by a informant. So we talked about how we deal with this, where you have people talking about the very real and actually real threat of right-wing violence being used to increase budgets of sort of institutions that we have kind of discredited. So a really good conversation last night, and I also get into pipelines, and we get into some Warrior Met and Nabisco stuff as well. So Left Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Go subscribe to the YouTube if you want the stuff for free.
And also Patreon. Yeah, that too. All right. Do we have Brandon and Matt? They're coming.
Hello.
Oh, hello, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing all right. And yourself, Emma?
I'm doing well. What's happening over on the discourse?
Well, I've just, not just, but earlier this week, we put out a new episode on the SoundCloud and on the Patreon for all of our listeners. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of a snafu. John got COVID.
Oh,
no. That's not funny, but so we had to postpone recording until tonight. So, hopefully we'll be able to get back on track.
Well, I mean, you laughing indicates he's probably all right, right?
Oh, yeah, he's fine.
Okay.
I mean, if he turns out not to be fine, it might be a little bit, grim to look back on, but
And Matt, hello, happy 35th.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I turned 35 years old today. Not today, excuse me, Monday. So this week. So yeah, I'm an old man now. Am I when Sam's not here, does that make me the senior citizen of the show?
I think it does, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Well, tonight
do you want to feel really old? I used to watch you when I was in college.
Ooh.
On the Majority Report.
Ooh, well, to be fair, I started there just what was it? 3 years out of. Oh, that is a long time, even when I say that. So, okay, yeah, geez. Anyway, tonight at youtube.com/Matt Binder at 9 p.m. Eastern time, I will be having on Zachary Patrizzo on the show. He's a writer at Salon. We'll be talking about a ton of things that I missed over the past week that I basically was offline. I decided I needed to take I didn't go on any crazy vacation, just went to visit family upstate. With the kids, and we did that, and I did my best to keep offline. But because of that, I need someone to update me on what's going on in the wonderful world of the right-wing media. So that's what we'll be doing on the show tonight, youtube.com/Matt Binder.
Wonderful. All right. Everyone, we're going to head into the fun half, 646-257-3920. See you there.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Oh.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Let's read a few IMs and then maybe you want to take a call, Matt?
Sure, sounds good. There's a slew of people already on the line waiting.
Oh, wonderful. Simple Socialist, I gotta say I agree with you guys that we should pull out of Afghanistan no matter what, but the sheer incompetence shown here by the military and logistical and basic command and control capacities really makes me doubt its effectiveness as a fighting force or anything other than just slush fund for the military-industrial complex.
Cool, that's what it is.
Yeah,
exactly. It is a slush fund.
It's entirely accurate. You've nailed it.
Slappy Tubbs, you're still a pup, old Matt.
Well, I guess.
Yeah, like the people who in the military who wanted to keep Afghanistan going were the people who saw career advancement out of it.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was, military empire and, Virginia-based contractors.
Wait, what's all this? We got out of Afghanistan? What did I miss? Took a week off.
Good conversation today, but I think they were still too deferential to SCOTUS. I agree. SCOTUS has never been up to the task to address racial inequality. They refuse to accept the second founding intended by the framers of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Even the Warren Court focused on procedural protection that was insufficient to address racial inequality.
And don't get me started on the Warren Commission.
Yeah, and the Terry decision had terrible effects, but what can you expect from an institution that has more ex-Confederate traitors than black jurists? I agree with you. I was just, they were nice and I was trying to be polite, but when at the end he said conservatism was a good thing, and that was obviously a hard disagree from me. I think he was trying to say judicial conservatism can be a good thing, but to me that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, the problem term is judicial supremacy, or even like co-equal. Like judges should not be a co-equal branch of government, in my opinion.
Yeah. Chantel, my grandfather is suffering from serious diabetes. He takes multiple insulin doses a day, and he's living a lifestyle which has a lot of medications and injections every day. He doesn't want to take the vaccine and invite the uncertainties. Can you please make a funny video about how stupid vaccine hesitants are featuring him? I think your reporting about vaccine skepticism is a broad brush, non-empathetic, and quite simply cold and dismissive. There are many, many, many non-Trump loyalists, non-Republicans who are skeptical for a wide range of issues. Try interviewing them once for a change on your show.
What are you talking about? I mean, sorry if I'm feeling a bit defensive, but I feel like we make this point all the time.
We do. We literally do.
Like, listen to the fucking show.
Yes.
It's irritating. Like, I literally go out of my way to, like, even when somebody's like, why don't you... Like, we had a IM the other day saying, hey, a lot of this is down to, like, people who can get it and say they don't want to. And that it's not about, like... literally just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, and we say it always comes back to we need to make it easier for people. So I don't really know what this person's issue is.
I'm a big fan, but I must share how the way you ask questions in these interviews is quite limiting sometimes. Oh, we're in lots of criticism today. Can you talk about? You have a tendency to say talk about this. I know. Can you talk about this topic rather than asking open-ended leading questions where the guests can take the topic where they want, the perspective which is. Okay. When you
Emma, hold on. Yeah. Big fan. Just want to say the main thing you do totally sucks.
Yeah, right. Joanna, I appreciate the constructive feedback. Sometimes I will do that when I feel like the guest is not necessarily going to stay down the topic, down the road that I want to go down. But duly noted, I will try to work on it. Thank you. And Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Boomers with tech issues. It's like Sam is still here. I don't think they were boomers. Slappy Tubbs 40. That's old. That's the old / young line. There you go, Matt. Come shower with Crowder. Latest stupid door update. He spent 18 minutes on Kyle Kalinske at a live show. I gotta buy tickets. Definitely worth the time and money.
Imagine you paid $25 for a show and 12 of those dollars basically went to the Kyle Kalinske portion of the segment.
Yeah.
Or maybe it would be 8. I don't know. I can't do math.
All right. Let's take...
I feel like I'm missing so much. I was literally gone just offline as much as possible for a week, and I have no idea what's going on.
Right.
You should see Jimmy Dore's live shows lately. They're very funny. They're like just getting mad at the people he's always mad at.
He puts up screenshots of my tweets and then has the crowd yell at the screen.
Oh, really? Yeah. Really?
Uh-huh.
You should charge for performing at these live shows.
I agree. I need some of that cash. I need a kickback. All right, let's take a call or two.
Let's go to 503. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I am Sam from Portland.
Hey, Sam from Portland. What would you like to talk about today?
There was this really interesting article, I think, in Willamette Weekly. It's an independent newspaper here, and it talks about private security guards taking over some of the roles of police in the context of them being less regulated and
where is this?
All that. Portland, Oregon. Willamette Weekly. Interesting.
Sounds like
check
a
it out.
libertarian utopia.
That's what I thought when I read it. So I thought you guys might like it.
That sounds
I mean, the police aren't great as is when they're run by, I don't know, the city, the state, the federal government. Can only imagine how much worse it'll get when you got the angle of private enterprise coming in and taking charge.
Well, presumably you could pay them to be less racist.
Well, depends how much you got. Depends how much you got.
It's a fee. It's an add-on fee.
Yeah, a premium for a less racist mercenary first. I don't know if you have any more details from that story to share with us, but do you?
Well, one detail is that some of the armed guards in downtown are carrying like AR-15 rifles with them. And then tangentially related from a different news story, a private security guard shot someone recently, and it turned out the guard, this is important too, in Portland, he didn't even have a license to carry a firearm.
Sounds
just like the normal police, but somehow even worse.
So one thing going on sort of 5 years after Dakota Access Pipeline stuff, where North Carolina-based Tiger Swan, a mercenary security firm, was hired by Energy Transfer Partners and was operating in North Dakota without the correct permitting. And so there's lawsuits, and that led to release of documents that led to Intercept reporting about Tiger Swan's use of counterinsurgency and counterintelligence, literally infiltrating leftist protest groups by these mercenary firms. And the only way we have any sort of insight into that, and there's Energy Transfer Partners is currently suing to keep those like 16,000 documents suppressed. But the only reason that it's even up in the air is that they were operating without a permit. If they didn't F that up, we would have no idea to see behind the curtain of this stuff. And that's, of course, why a pipeline company or a city would love to deal with these sorts of mercenary firms rather than their own law enforcement, because they're able to do things like, infiltrate and plant guns on people. And there's a lot less transparency in their actions.
Well, that reminds me that I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but Emily Blunt and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson are making a movie about the first female Pinkerton agent.
Yeah, first Pinkerton agent. Yeah,
this is their new.
Is that for real?
That's for real.
This is for real.
I thought they were just doing that Jungle Cruise movie this summer.
No, they like Jungle Cruise so much.
On that, yeah.
It's like if they followed up Romancing the Stone with like a movie about the world's like first female, union buster, but they didn't.
Oh fuck!
I think Brandon's camera laughed at that one.
The Pinkertons just took out Brandon.
My laugh just like reverberated through the screen, and the airwaves just knocked it over with the power of my laughter.
They're trying to silence me, much like they did.
I know you're being shadow
Mike
banned.
Lindell.
Yeah, you're being shadow banned.
Do you feel a sharp pain in your underarm all of a sudden, Brandon?
Is that Havana syndrome or like the CIA's cancer gun? I'm not sure.
Right.
Yeah, probably both. I think that's the code name for the cancer gun.
That'd be
Havana
funny
syndrome.
if Havana syndrome is just like it's a weapon we plan to use on Cuba, just radiating into.
Also, caller, we should probably say goodbye because you're still on here listening to us shoot the shit.
I think if anything,
no worries.
I mean, Havana syndrome is clearly fake, but go ahead. Sorry.
I hung up on him. I thought.
I would be very willing to believe that just American military personnel are very susceptible to the power of suggestion. And so, like, if you tell them that there is a mysterious illness going around, they will just develop symptoms of it.
Right.
I mean, we've at least I've seen The Men Who Stare at Goats, the movie based on the John Ronson book, basically about how people in the Pentagon were trying to run through walls and kill goats with their minds. So I mean, best people.
Let's go back. You want to take another call and then we'll do some.
Yes, that sounds good.
571. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
This is you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Holy crap. Oh, hi. I'm Amber. I'm from Northern Virginia.
Hey, Amber. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, I was hoping to talk about school board meetings. There's been a lot of talk about local meetings, and I've attended a few both over the past few months and also over the last few years. So I wanted to give my perspective.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so, oh, wow. So I've been attending school board meetings for about 3 years, and I'm in Fairfax County, and I grew up in Loudoun County. And the school board meeting back in June, I think I got a little bit of national attention, was definitely the scariest school board meeting that I've been to in the last 3 years. Just some background. Our state legislature passed a law requiring school boards to adopt transgender inclusive policies. And but before the beginning of this school year, which today is the beginning of the school year for Loudoun County, the school board had to approve a policy as per this law. So of course, all of the conservatives and all of the Republican activists have been showing up at school board meetings super pissed about this. And this is nothing new. This has been going on for years and years, anytime anything pro-LGBTQ plus shows up. But it has been so hostile over the last few months that it is absolutely ridiculous. And on top of that, there was a teacher from an elementary school who spoke out, I think in May or early June, who was saying that he would refuse to respect any policy passed, that he would, it is his Christian right, his religious right, to use the name and pronouns that he, that he deems is most appropriate. So regardless of the students or the parents' opinion. And he ended up being put on administrative leave less than a week later because there were so many parents calling into the school saying that they do not want their student being put in his classroom. So this is perfect fuel for conservatives to say, oh, you're infringing on his First Amendment rights. It's his right to religion to speak on this, indigenous gender and dead name people. And of course, it's a perfect opportunity to shit on trans people. So perfect storm. But at these school board meetings, is the three things that I can really say they are going after is they are going after transgender students nonstop, which is, and the crowd has just gotten bigger of that. So it's the same people from 3 years ago, but it's just grown. And it's also a mixture of anti-mask, open schools back up, and of course, critical race theory.
Mm. Yep.
It doesn't, all those videos that have come out in recent months, especially, makes it seem like these sort of meetings are not the ones that you really want to attend. You know, these have become like circus, like sideshows. It's become.
We covered
really...
it on the caller. You might be kind of like, I guess, inspired by this. Did you see the beginning of the show today?
Oh yeah, beginning of the show. Well, I think I missed I think I came in closer to whenever you were doing the interview.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah.
I've been on but I remember, like, I was listening last week whenever Benjamin Dixon was on and you all were talking about school board meetings. But it's just, they had a follow-up meeting where they actually voted on the policy. And it just kind of brought everything up again. And the school board has changed their entire structure for how they do school board meetings as a result. But even at like previous school board meetings, like, yeah, we would get a lot of angry people and a lot of signs and everything. But this was also, and I think the thing that worried me most was they are very well coordinated and they're very well funded. And especially being in Northern Virginia, we have a lot of people who say, oh, I'm just a concerned parent of Loudoun County, without disclosing at all that, like, one guy, Aim Pryor, who used to work for the Trump administration in one of his departments specifically for things like marketing and PR. So like, and luckily, you know, we're in a pretty liberal, democratic kind of area, Northern Virginia is that very, DC centric kind of area. But for a lot of places in Virginia, in other places, these school board meetings get dominated by these conservative parents and folks who are just trying to also make their names known before they run for school board. And it's, there's been you've been talking a lot about that this is all being used by Republicans to kind of get ready for these school board meetings. 100%. They are using this as getting ready for next year's elections and the year after. And I don't know if Democrats are really ready for it. And they're not
ready for it.
No.
That's the answer. I mean, that is this level of outrage and activation on that level, on that grassroots level, is going to be a formidable force, especially on the state level and at these school boards. Teachers, I worry for them in terms of targeting and things like that.
It's the Tea Party all over again.
Yep.
And of course, there are certain Democrats that are going to collaborate with the foreclosure of opportunities that gives the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the call.
Appreciate the call, though. Thank you.
If I can just to add, there was talk of a Democratic event where they were going to have, and they wanted to have some elected officials show up, some people running in primaries. We have elections every single year in Virginia, so it's nonstop election season here. And they had this event outside, but what happened is they were public about it, and so the Fairfax and Loudoun GOP, all these open Loudoun, open Fairfax groups under that event sent emails out 2 days before saying, we're going to show up an hour and a half before the Democrats have an event. They have their events. They have people come and speak. And then as the Democratic group is having their event and the line opens up to go into the school board meeting, everyone in the conservative rally just gets in line. And at that school board meeting, there was maybe 90% of the people who were in the school board meeting were from that conservative rally. And so they just completely out-organized the Democratic event. And there was just no oversight or insight into it, thinking of what could happen if they were just so public about the event without thinking how people could plan around it. It's worrisome. Yep.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, man.
Yep. Thank you.
It's always snowy in Ottawa. Happy 35th, Binder. Really puts the old in old Matt.
Yep. Oh boy, they're all coming out today.
Well, I mean, I kind of threw you under the bus there.
I feel like everyone's ready for Sam to come back.
Yeah.
Judging by the tone of these IMs.
It's all good. I'll take it. Unleash all of your pent up Sam comments and IMs on me today. I'll take it.
Right. There needs to be some sort of punching bag. Mailman Paul, Amy Goodman says talk about to her interviewees every day. So you are good, Emma. That's probably where I got it from, to be honest. I listen to a lot of Democracy Now. So, all right, let's talk about
McCarthy. I want to do this McCarthy thing.
Okay. All right. So, yes, this is a new tradition here where Matt doesn't allow me to see certain clips before we go on air because he wants to see my reaction in real time.
It's a blind item, folks.
Right.
Ooh, the same will work for me because I haven't seen this one yet either.
Yes. So we're all in the same boat except for the mad scientist Matt over here. Now, here is Kevin McCarthy this I've seen, but there's a Matt Out clip coming up that I haven't seen. Kevin McCarthy apparently doesn't know how to talk. This is his response to a question about Trump's plans to withdraw from Afghanistan.
Oh, I think we might need sound, Bradley.
Wow, he literally doesn't know how to talk.
This is a very bad performance of speech.
He's just a mime.
President Trump wrong to agree to withdraw troops?
Well, President Trump had actually decreased the troops from 15,000 to 2,500, not one casualty. President Trump's...
But there was a deal to withdraw.
It wasn't this deal. I make Mike Pompeo and President Trump have been very clear about this. Even the former Secretary of Defense have been very clear about this. There were requirements that had to be met. You watch time and again, whenever the Taliban did not meet the requirement, there was ramifications for that. Quick, swift, and very difficult.
Motherfuckers had meet their requirements.
Well, you know, look, I'm sympathetic to that. Sometimes, if I don't have my cashews, I get all mealy mouthed. But apparently, this is not a something that's inconsistent with Mike McCarthy.
Yeah,
I mean, Kevin
McCarthy. Yeah, not the football coach.
No.
So this reminds me of the only, I haven't watched Maddow in, half a decade, I think. And this is from about that long ago. The segment that really does stick with me, though, every time I see Kevin McCarthy, because I think this is a really, like, if we had the kind of research budget that the Maddow team does, this is what I would like to, sort of task people with compiling. So, Bradley, if you have this segment from Maddow.
I still can't. I can't access it on my computer. Still, Matt. Sorry. So sorry. The Mac is just not compatible with this clip.
I just put
it. You don't need a research budget just for the research. You need a research budget to play other people's research.
Check out the newest one in samples. This will work. We'll just have Dorsey tidy this little part up because we do need to see this.
Yes. Boom, 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 boom. No.
Apparently, it wasn't the boomers.
Sometimes truth comes out in other manners.
Sometimes truth comes out in other manners.
In other manners. It wasn't what I, in my mind, was saying out there.
It wasn't what I, in my mind, was saying out there?
It wasn't what I, in my mind. And believe me now, I do not want to make that harm Benghazi Committee. I do not want to make that harm.
This has been a bit of a setback. It's been a setback, yes. Because I do not want to make that harm Benghazi Committee in any way.
I do not want to make that harm Benghazi Committee in any way. Not getting better. When he gave his big foreign policy speech the first business day after John Boehner stepped down as speaker, the kind-hearted of us, maybe he spoke so in that speech just because it was that first day, just because he was nervous, first day jitters maybe.
We don't have the same as difficult decision, but this White House is managing the decline and putting us in tough decisions for the future. Petraeus and Crocker had an effective politically strategy to match the military strategy. The simple promise to all of our heroes to the need when they need it most. The president would allow the ban on Iranian oil exports to be lifted and also stand by a Russia blackmails an entire continent, all the while keeping the place of the ban on America. In the past few years alone, I have visited Poland, Hungary, Estonia.
Hungary?
All right,
Isn't this the guy that Kevin Spacey's character is based on in House of Cards? Or is that Steve Scalise?
Well, I thought he was more of a Bill Clinton type in House of Cards because he's a Democrat ostensibly, but
Right.
he's from the South and he's more of a.
That was total Clinton vibes, yeah.
Yeah, I had Bill Clinton vibes, but and also of course his wife is a schemer, similarly to Hillary Clinton. But like what sticks, that was a very funny segment. I'm glad we saw that, Matt. Like he can't speak, Mike McCarthy. He's not very bright, and. Damn it! I said Mike McCarthy again. Kevin McCarthy. And as I'm saying, he can't speak. All right.
Emma's got the pad on the brain.
I can't hear you, Bradley. Your Wi-Fi's cutting
Wi-Fi's
out.
out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bradley's remote this week. But like, what's also just fascinating to me about Kevin McCarthy is that he's trying so hard to keep up with Mitch McConnell, and the guy's just not bright enough to be Machiavellian like Mitch McConnell. Say what you want about Mitch McConnell, the guy thinks a million steps ahead. McCarthy's not convincing. He can't even beat Paul Ryan. It's quite sad, very sad.
Well, apparently I was right that Kevin Spacey shadowed McCarthy around the Capitol to prepare for the role. But McCarthy, perhaps in reference to his own inability to like be as good as Kevin Spacey at being a weird, crazy politician, says that it's intriguing but not realistic. So he acknowledges that, you know, Kevin Spacey is a better orator, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like Kevin Spacey has like followed Kevin McCarthy around. He's like, this guy can't speak. I guess I'll just do a foghorn leghorn voice.
Did anyone watch that show that would
I'll say. What was that?
Did anyone watch that show that would end? Like, how did they wrap up the show without Kevin Spacey?
Well, I've maybe seen 3 episodes of that show, like total.
Yeah, I watched the first season and then watched the beginning of the second season, and then when I saw where they were going with it, I was like, I'm out. This looks lame.
Yeah,
it's no Charmed. I'll tell you that.
So let's turn now to Eric Prince. Eric Prince, infamous, just war criminal, former Blackwater head and Betsy DeVos's brother, for people who don't know. He went on Tucker Carlson's show yesterday, the daytime one, the one where Tucker gets to wear a flannel because he's a part of the American dream, and he's just like you and me. And maybe that's also why the whole set looks like it's, you know, in some sort of wood shop, a very fancy one.
It's in the Neo-Confederate workshop.
Right. That's where they make the crosses that they burn. Eric Prince, it came out that he's selling flights out of Afghanistan for $6,500 a ticket because, you know, he can't miss an opportunity to make a buck in a war zone. But he revealed, if it wasn't apparent already by his actions and his just general bloodthirstiness, how he truly feels about non-Americans, specifically Muslims, and just kind of how he views them as animals and imbeciles in this lovely chat with Tucker Carlson on his daytime program.
This is an extremely dangerous time for the U.S. military, solely from the bad political leadership and the senior officers making those decisions. And sadly, it's the rank and file. It's the E3, the E5, and the lieutenants and the captains that bear the brunt from really, really, really bad.
What we'll have to do, because Bradley's internet's not working, if you can IM me the clips and I'll play them on this Slate computer here. So sorry, we just need a little bit more setup here.
I think that what he's saying is kind of right. No one is really thinking about the war profiteers here. You know, how many people are going to be unable to buy that third mega yacht because we've ended one of our many permanent wars prematurely in their minds.
Good point. Good point. Sorry to the audience, guys. We're just having some technical stuff.
The deep state is taking us down. They're afraid of the truth, Emma. I've seen this before. Again, at Mike Lindell's cybersecurity conference. But, you know,
very
here
enlightening. Yes.
Very insidious.
We'll have this in 3, 2, 1. Again, Dorsey, please just fix this in post. Here we go.
This is an extremely dangerous time for the U.S. military, solely from the bad political leadership and the senior officers making those decisions. And sadly, it's the rank and file. It's the E3, the E5, and the lieutenants and the captains that bear the brunt from really, really, really bad decisions in Washington.
So I'm kind of fixated on the airfield question because I just think that distills the bad decision making pretty perfectly. So you have Bagram, former Soviet air base, which we extended into.
It's like 13,000 feet long.
It's got to be one of the biggest in the region, right? I mean, it's a very serious air base. We don't control it anymore, but that's clearly the obvious staging ground for an evacuation, right?
Yep.
Can we use it now?
The Taliban immediately had thousands of people occupy the airfield, and again, they even lacked the nuance for how do you get a bunch of thousands of people to move off of a runway quickly. Do an airdrop of $1 million $1 bills 2 kilometers away. Trust me, all those people will leave the airfield, and you could reoccupy it without a shot fired. This is not rocket science, but it's the lack of creativity that you have in those officers that just think so inside the box they're stuck in it. Hell, you don't even have to drop real dollars, photocopy dollars. Drop them 2 kilometers away, and all those Afghans will leave the airfield. Done.
Why would, I mean, it's a brilliant idea. Why wouldn't we? I guess it's just too clever for a bureaucracy.
That's a brilliant idea, folks. That sounds like one of those ideas that you hear about 50 years later as like a way to assassinate Castro, or like one of those like World War II allied plans. Like, oh, we're going to drop pornography over Hitler's vacation home to give him a heart attack when he sees just all this interracial porn we're dropping. And in reality, you know, I'm pretty sure the Taliban has probably seized millions of dollars at our many military bases that we've left unoccupied and full of weapons there. So you know, what's another million?
They're working out on the equipment that we provided, and they've stolen all the arms and technology that we've flooded into that country. As I said, it's like a beautiful full circle moment, right? We provided the Mujahideen with arms, handshake agreements with Ronald Reagan, and now they're getting even more from us in this circle of life situation. It's really quite beautiful. But like the thing about Eric Prince, one, I thought Tucker Carlson was an anti-war crusader who really was principled in that stance, and that's why some leftists think that he's able to speak to some of the same issues as them. I'm being sarcastic, of course, but that's why he's having Eric Prince on, who's like the Prince of Darkness, as he's been referred to, one of the like most evil war profiteers in the world.
Well, I'm sure at some point, right after that clip cuts out on the version we put on the show, Carlson gets him in a real gotcha question or something like that. I'm sure.
Yeah, that's why he was giggling along as Tucker Carlson has referred to Muslims as monkeys, as he envisions these people that he looks down upon scrambling for these fake dollar bills. They're being thrown from planes. Like that's truly how that's how they see the people that they want to conquer, as just like primal and not that intelligent. And when Eric Prince talks about creativity or whatever, it's like they're not thinking outside the box. What he means is they should be hiring me to do this. Like I can think outside the box, aka murder outside the bounds of law.
You know,
also thinking outside the box is like what, like it's like an idea from a Bugs Bunny cartoon, literally. Like it feels like something that seems like it's straight out of an episode of the Looney Tunes. I mean, come on.
I mean, I think the far right have a difficult time right now, and that's not necessarily the Eric Princes who just want to make money off of this like military industrial complex grift, but the Tucker Carlsons out there have to, you know, tread a very thin line between like condemning the Taliban, which many on the far right seem to be also, you know, praising for their ability to defeat the woke military of the United States / like do regressive policies in their country, versus like their desire to be involved in an endless military quagmire in the Middle East to prove our sort of, you know, geopolitical dominance. So, I mean, Tucker Carlson's fans are probably a lot more split on the politics of the Taliban than they are necessarily on the politics of being at infinite war with them.
Right. Exactly. All right, let's take a few more calls and we can read some IMs too.
All right, cool. Let's go to 415. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 415.
This is Spacco from San Francisco.
Spacco, how are you doing? What would you like to talk about today?
Hey, so good to talk to you. Matt, I wanted to say that I have a couple of pieces up, Matt, Emma, a couple of pieces up on Digby at Hullabaloo, and then today at Crooks and Liars, talking about vaccinations, fake vaccination cards, and why people should go to jail for taking and using fake vaccination cards and breaking public health laws. So I just wanted to, you know, I don't want to go on like I do sometimes, but I wanted to tell people that one of the big things that I've been working on is figuring out what are the ways that the people who broke public health laws, particularly Donald Trump's campaign staff, when they did their rallies across the country and they became super spreader events. I've done a bunch of research and they broke public health laws in Oklahoma, New Jersey, DC, Virginia. And I'm trying to figure out a way to get these people arrested for this. Everything from, you know, delaying vaccination, delaying test results. And the problem is that I found that the states and a lot of the governments don't want to do any sort of legal enforcement laws. So the piece I wrote up in Crooks and Liars and in Digby was about, hey, they busted these people for breaking federal laws for using fake vaccination cards. And the people said, well, we don't want to maybe go after the individuals. And so I guess I want to bring up the question or the issue is, are you aware or do you understand, do you see the same thing, which is nobody wants to arrest the people who are endangering people's lives for spreading COVID?
Right. I mean, I see what you're saying, and I agree. It's pretty weird how, especially with the falsifying the vaccination cards and selling them online. It seems pretty crazy that there hasn't been much news surrounding, anyone getting in trouble with the law for that. We've seen all sorts of different crimes over this past, I mean, obviously throughout history, that are a lot less consequential. Have the book thrown at them, of course. But thinking about just this past year and a half, like pandemic related things, when people bought items to price gouge, there were stories going out around how horrible that was, and cops showing up and fining individuals for doing that. I guess because there was an economic incentive involved. They were making more than the legit big businesses selling those items. I don't know. That seemed like they threw the book at those people too. Whereas apparently falsifying the vaccine cards so unvaccinated people can go around and go into establishments that require vaccinations. In New York City, you're going to be required to show your vaccine card, period, before going into any indoor location. I mean, nothing. There's no clamping down on it. It is quite bizarre.
Yeah, I mean,
it really bothers me. Yeah.
One reason you might not see people arrested for one reason you might not see people arrested for fake vaccination cards is because cops probably use those a lot themselves.
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, yeah, it's a big problem. I saw this story about India was doing fake tests. Indians are using fake reports to travel and skip exams. This was from Quartz, and I have no doubt that there's a huge market for it here. I've seen some of that viral stuff online too, of people having big decks of vaccination cards that supposedly correspond to real batch numbers somehow. I don't know how that works.
Right. Well, what Matt and Emma, you were talking the other day, and I actually did another piece about this, about punishment and who in the people to punish and the right people to punish, and why there needs to be enforcement as well as punishment. And it was a really interesting piece, and I was basing it on some of the stuff that you had said, but it got too long. And one of the things that a reason I wanted to look at way back when Trump was doing the super spreader events is they hid and obstructed all sorts of things about who was infected at the event using privacy laws and spreading it across multiple states. And I've been trying to get, attorney generals and congressional committees to do this kind of investigation. And there really is a real fear from people for doing it, not only for, politically, but one of the things we also see is the violence that people have for just getting mask laws. So if you're going to say, okay, we're not only going to, we're going to arrest people for breaking serious laws, the public health community, I found, they're terrified. They resign and they quit. The enforcement, legal people, they don't want to do any kind of enforcement. So what I liked was that the Biden administration looked at what were the federal laws that we can break, like the CDC is a federal agency, and if they're faking a federal card, that's a federal law. So what I'm looking at is there federal laws that we can do to stop, still super spreader events? Like, I can't believe that the Alabama event happened. It was kind of like, oh yeah, it happened. I've been tracking this stuff since Tulsa and finding out that they, clearly connected to spreading it. And Glenn Kirshner did a piece about how this should be, manslaughter. I mean, this is malicious. They know it about intent, but everyone's afraid to go after them.
I feel like
even at the highest level.
I feel like the thing with the big events now, like, yeah, last year, of course, you could argue that, but ever since the vaccine started going out, and then you had even the CDC come out in May with that stupid idea to say you could stop wearing your masks, everybody who've been vaccinated. I mean, we've seen big events work within the legal confines, obviously doing all the things they need to do. And, Lollapalooza, all these huge concerts and festivals, and to the point where you can't stop it from spreading there either. And obviously it seems like those events have gone on with very few. When I say few, I mean hundreds of people, hundreds of cases in an event that has hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, I think it would be hard to sort of argue that one event is okay and another is not. But with the vaccine cards, I'm totally with you. I think that's completely legit. I mean, I can't get any more clear. Falsifying a document that's being given out by local or statewide or whoever is involved, whoever is responsible authorities. I mean, that's to me is a clear cut.
That's fraud.
Case where, yes.
So,
yes.
I want to push back a little bit though, because I don't think a carceral solution to this problem is necessarily the most practical or even, practical, but B, I don't think it would be reasonable to sort of implement just based on the entire culture we had leading up to the vaccine. Ultimately speaking, I think Matt is correct in that, people are looking for who to blame about the rampant spread of this virus. And it seems like, open and shut. We have people out there who are falsifying records because they want to participate in activities they otherwise wouldn't be able to, based on certain regulations that we have. But we have that across the board for things. We have people falsifying documents for various reasons related to being frozen out of systems, being, immigrants who don't have documents. And that's not to say that it's the same situation, but it's important to remember prior to the whole COVID-19 vaccine situation, it's something that I, think about a lot. We had people across the aisle coming out and saying it's everyone, everyone is capable of making their own healthcare decisions without the big government getting in the way. We had that coming from Democrats and we had that coming from Republicans in some variation or another as an excuse to not provide, the ideological underpinning for why the government should be responsible for mandating of, basic level of healthcare or providing a basic level of healthcare for the population. And, once the vaccine comes around, once the COVID-19 came around and people were, shown, the American populace was shown to be resistant to the very idea of social and public health, in the sense that we need people to be on board with, wearing masks, social distancing, respecting each other's personal space in a way that Americans just aren't conditioned to suddenly sort of pivot and try to blame the individual who has been conditioned by various institutions to feel this way without holding those institutions responsible, I think is just, regressive policy, right? I think we need to understand how we got to this position where people think that they're capable of, making their own legitimate healthcare decisions in a way that is equal or not to public health officials or doctors, which is not to say we shouldn't have punishments, but I think that
Emma brought up too, which was right, not punching down. That's one of the reasons why I focused on the ones where you look at the big, massive consequences. The people like the CD, not the CDC, the Trump
folks, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah. Those are the ones to go after. And those are the ones when they broke the law back in, last year, and nobody went after them is a different thing. And I totally hear what you're saying, Ben. It is very important to look at saying, okay, we know we can't enforce any of them, but we need to make a message statement that we need to get some people, because that even gets picked up by Fox News. And they fight the mandates because they don't want to be lawbreakers. And it's about publicizing some of the big cases and publicizing some of the intentional ones. Ones I want to focus on are the people who intentionally, willfully, and maliciously decide not to wear a mask, but also to hide their status, those things. Those are the ones I think are really important to get, because we fall into that same thing. It was like, we don't want to go after the little guy for whatever reason, but we do need to make some sort of statement, because otherwise no enforcement and no penalties means that they'll just keep doing it. And I want to go back in time, and I can't. I was trying to get it last year, like in June of last year, to say, hey, they broke these laws, they spread it, they predicted it, we have evidence. Why is nobody doing anything? Because it would have stopped other future events. It may be different now because of the vaccine, but we could keep sending out the message that people die when we have these events, and there should be consequences for the intentional spreading and disregard of laws as well as public health. And if we don't, then it just, oh, well, nothing's going to happen, which is ridiculous.
The thing, though, is that the powers that be are all doing parties themselves. Like, they're all in part of, and like, there is this palpable desire to move past the pandemic, and, like, mostly everybody who's in power is vaccinated. And so, like,
I mean, look, I don't think we should be, throwing people in jail for having fake vaccine cards. I think the people selling them and manufacturing them, we should.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's definitely what I'm referring to.
I mean, but I don't know how much more of, like, as far as like masks. I don't think there's any kind of, like, the solution to people not wearing masks is to give them a mask or tell them to leave. And, right. So, go ahead.
No, I just think we need to sort of contend with how we got to a point where we have, such a substantial portion of the population who is capable of re-indoctrinating themselves with, let's say, disinformation about the vaccine, about public health, this and that, without any sort of need to come to grips with reality. Because I think ultimately, punishing the little guy, I don't necessarily know if that's what we don't do here, because we have no problem punishing the little guy, but understanding why there are so many little guys who behave this way, I think is something we avoid, because, those fingers tend to point to big guys. I don't think we would have as many people who were vaccine skeptical without any sort of real, sort of like underlying health concern or legitimate motivation if we didn't have an entire, segment of our news population that is allowed to spread misinformation and has been allowed to spread misinformation for 30, 40 years. I think trying to ask why people behave the way they do under the pandemic conditions is a larger question about why were we all behaving this exact same way prior to that. And it's sort of not only an entitlement. I think that we've allowed a lot of politicians on the sort of semi-left progressive side to act aghast or confused as to why our population behaves the way, when they were feeding into the underlying narratives that makes our culture so individualistic, that makes people think, like, we had an earlier call to talk about school board meetings and how they become sort of battlefields for these conservative ideas. But it's important to remember that this mask thing is connected deeply with our and American ideas of, freedom, right? And freedom in America is sometimes, or most commonly understood by people as, what rights do I have that supersede other people's rights? So does my right to not wear a mask supersede everyone else's more loosely established rights to not, quote unquote, get sick in a way that is, can't be directly tied back to me? We just don't have this culture of social cohesion that would engender a sense of public health. And so a lot of the reasons why people are being convinced to get vaccine because they'll be allowed to go out and party the next day are just individualistic narratives that are not true, that are going to cause, vaccine rates to dip too once people realize they're not true. And, maybe we could work towards a punitive solution if on the front end we allowed for a more sort of revolutionary possibility within our culture and these cultural changes that we need. I think, punitive solution is just another version of like a quick fix to the problem, saying that the vaccine was, when in reality, we need to start to really dig deep into why people are just, they view themselves as living in an island.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I will appreciate the call, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to get to another sound, or
do you have one in mind?
Do you want to do that? We could do, I don't know, honestly, I don't know. Let me see. We got the InfoWars one. We got Matt Walsh. We got Candace
we should probably
Owens.
talk about Matt Walsh.
Want to do the Matt Walsh one?
Yeah, let's talk about that, just because that was going viral this morning a little bit in terms of a trending topic. So let me find it really quick. Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, he was trending a bit this morning because he was going after Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, who has been as anti-mask, anti-vax, clearly just appealing to COVID denials throughout the country. I can't think of a governor who's been more visible than maybe DeSantis or Greg Abbott in this area. And those are way bigger states. So Noam has been on the national stage giving the base what they want for quite a long time. But not enough for Matt Walsh. And so, of course, he resorts to misogyny, right? That's what he's got to do. When she doesn't give him exactly what he wants in terms of the very specific brand of COVID denial that he wants her to engage in, well, immediately goes to misogyny. Sorry. Poor Matt's doing multiple jobs right now. He's got it.
I tell you what, I am done and have been done for a long time with these Republicans who are too afraid to use their power. What is it you want to do, Christy? I mean, you don't want to use your power here. You didn't want to use your power over schools to stop them from putting men into women's sports. Just like the Republican governor in Arkansas didn't want to use his power to stop children from being genitally mutilated. So what do you want to use your power to do? You have it. What do you expect to do? Well, the answer is for these Republicans, they expect to do nothing. They want to be given the power just so that they have it. And then they want to sit there and do nothing and wait until they're out of power. And then they can start talking again about all the things they would be doing if they only had that power again. That's the game for Republicans. That has been that same game for decades now. When they're out of power, they say, give us the power. There's so many things. Here's all the things we could do. And then the voters say, okay, well, here you go. And then instead of doing things, they spend their time coming up with excuses and saying, well, hang on, actually, we can't do that because X, Y, Z, and no, that's not going to work because of these reasons over here. And if we do this over here, well, then the Democrats will do it when they're in power. No use for these Republicans who have made themselves useless. No use for Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem is a very attractive woman.
There we go.
So she's got that going for her. That, as far as I can tell, that's the only reason why she was ever looked at as some sort of 2024 potential frontrunner.
It keeps going.
The hype and everything that she's gotten from conservative media is entirely based on the fact that she's an extremely attractive woman, which she is.
No, dig up.
But, you know, you put 50 pounds on her and another 20 years.
It just keeps going.
I don't think she gets any of the hype.
It's like 20 seconds left of this.
Because outside of that, she's just your standard sort of corporatist establishment Republican who's not interested in doing anything.
And I think she's so fucking hot. Right. So
hey, honey, Kristi Noem.
He just keeps going, right? He just keeps going. This was over because I guess she didn't preemptively ban vaccine mandates. So like, he's like, why aren't you doing what my boy Greg Abbott's doing down in Texas, huh? If you put 50 pounds on you, I'm not going to want to screw you anymore. And then what good are you for me?
Hey, Kristi, ban the vaccines or get back in the kitchen.
So, Kristi Noem has responded to this. I don't know if you saw this.
I did. She says it's very misogynistic. Oh, now that it affects her, she's going to speak out against misogyny.
She says, instead of engaging in a debate about the proper role of government and how it isn't conservative to tell people how to do business, Matt Walsh stoops to horrible misogyny. Eyes up here, Matt. That's what...
Eyes up here. Oh, wow.
What's interesting is, you know...
whatever's happening right now, it's like the blurriest thing I've ever seen.
That was the tweet. But
I accidentally turned on Google Translate with hieroglyphics, apparently.
I know, right?
It's funny because Noem was originally hitting DeSantis and Abbott for masks and stuff like that. Look, we're still doing Sturgis. They just had Sturgis again, and it caused a massive spike, if you could believe it, or it coincided with, you know, let's not be too hasty, but it looks very likely that it caused, again, another spike that's going to infect surrounding states. So the idea that maybe we should allow businesses to force customers to have vaccine proof isn't the worst thing in the world right now after a massive fuck up like the second Sturgis COVID mass spreader event.
Well, and also, you got to think Kristi Noem is thinking in her head, just like, Jesus Christ, I rented out the National Guard to go down to the border for nothing. I thought that would build goodwill with you people. I thought that you wouldn't just completely turn to talking about how I wouldn't be that hot if I got fat. Like, duh, I thought that stunt was going to buy me some time. And then immediately, because she doesn't do exactly what Matt Walsh wants, she's not even talented. All she's good for is just her looks.
And
Hey, Kristi, you gotta ban the mask or we can't see your pretty face, hon.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't really ever polling well. She hasn't polled above Candace Owens, as far as I know, for like 2024. It's all theoretical, and like it is probably because Matt Walsh and his like Daily Wire folks, that's where he's at, right? Like, talk about how hot she is all the time. Like,
right.
I think there's a lot of projection going on here.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's the same thing with like AOC, right? They basically say she's like a stupid bimbo, and secretly they just all want to hook up with her.
And let's watch this video of her dancing again.
I know. Put it in slow-mo and maybe to some music like boom, 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 or whatever.
This might make me the asshole, but like if you voted for her just because you think she's hot, that's you. That says more about you than it does about her. Obviously, I think the psychosexual obsession of the far right with like the women that belong to like politics generally is, you could fill a whole book with it, and many have been filled with their like weird, kinks. But I think this new level of like AOC has broken their brain, like, completely agnostic of any of her politics. Like they have she lives rent free in their head because like they think of her as like just too pretty for politics. It's very
that's it, right? Because it used to be old white men, and they could just kind of make that's politics. And then I go to my dirty magazines for what I want to see there, or my wife. I'm trying to take it back to the 70s or 80s here. But now it's confuses them. Oh, it's a woman, and it's a woman who's, not Dianne Feinstein in terms of age. Like, how do I square this? And as soon as it doesn't compute with their exact worldview, they go to misogyny.
Well, I mean, I hate to sort of like be all Freudo-Marxist on people, but like they're obsessed with their own impotence. They're obsessed with being cucked. They're obsessed with the idea of cucking. They're obsessed with the idea of like, white genocide as manifest through like Black interracial dating, and in little moments like this, obviously they're misogynist, but of course it just comes across as just like him spilling his like feelings or, insecurities about women and, that can map onto a large portion of the far right, just like out into the open. Mm-hmm. Even as he like trails off and just goes like, yeah, because if she were fat, we would all be like, not into that, right?
Right.
Matt Walsh is especially egregious when it comes to everything you just said. I feel like he is just like mask off all the time with Matt Walsh.
Well, when he's not running down to like the school board meetings to complain about the schools his kids do not go to.
He's done that actually.
He does it all the time. I mean, I think the far right, one of the things the caller mentioned earlier, I did some work on school boards in grad school. And like, back then the one I was studying was not a big sort of battleground for any particular legislation. But like the far right, I think appreciates the potentiality of local politics to keep people riled up forever. And also, contribute to that culture they have of just like very public, tantrums. Every time Kevin Sorbo goes into a Starbucks and they don't wish him Merry Christmas, he just has to cause a huge scene. And they're just a lot more comfortable with that than I think, most normal shame amount having people.
All right.
Normal shame amount having.
People who have the normal amounts of shame.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say
Rachel Maddow is going to one day dig up that phrasing by you and put it in a compilation?
Right. I'm fine with that. Honestly, I think everyone gets it. I've never claimed to be the world's greatest orator.
You actually are quite the orator, which makes, I think, that one stand out more.
Yes, you are the orator. I mean, you're not calling Kevin McCarthy Mike McCarthy over and over again for...
I don't know who Mike McCarthy is.
Well...
Yeah, I don't either.
Good, because he's provided Packers fans with much frustration for quite a long time. But for me, I'm quite thrilled that he's the head coach of the Cowboys now. Extend him, Jerry. Extend him.
All right, let's get away from this sports talk ASAP.
No,
You guys want to?
no. I'm not being bullied into no longer talking about sports anymore. I've been convinced by Matt that this is the way to infiltrate these spaces with leftist talking points.
Work for Clay Travis. Well,
yes.
Besides the leftist.
And so this is my new empowerment moment. Rob from Dedham, Lollapalooza had nearly 380,000 gate receipts and only 203 cases tied to it, according to the AP. Well, it's outdoors. Not
outdoors, there were vax or negative test requirements.
Yeah. Not perfect calculations on total attendance or cases, but definitely far from a super spreader. Two major factors: vaccine negative test required, and it was outside. Okay, well, there we go.
I mean, but it is to contrast that with Sturgis. I mean, it's two very, I think, instructive case studies.
Bullprog, Matt Walsh is doing left-wing Jimmy Dore bit. Godcat, I know it sounds gross, but I fucking love you all, and I just need to tell you that. Love that, Godcat. You're smoking the good stuff. Lily and Philly, think about if you really want people to be in contact with police, threat of death or prison, threat of rape over minor document falsification. This is America. It will never be limited to just vaccine documents. Yeah, I hear that. Fierce Deity 73, personally, I'm appalled the Biden administration has neglected to employ the paint a tunnel onto a cliff face method. I don't get it.
It's very smart.
Well,
That's making fun of
to lure the Taliban away from Bagram. You paint a tunnel, on a sheer wall, and I guess you put you paint some kind of like trap on the other side using some sort of perspective trick, and they just all run into the tunnel, and that's how we win the war on terror.
Right. Denver Dave, incentivize good behavior, pay people, get paid days off, give free health screenings or checkups. I agree.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, America can't act confused as to why people don't trust healthcare in America, because that's just the entire, past 30, 40, 50 years, pick a date where we've just been delegitimizing the need for that, or having a personal relationship with yourself and, with any healthcare provider. So to ask, I just really, why were we told that we would never need that is a different question.
Right. Real sports guy. Emma, do you play fantasy football? If not, why? I do. I'm in 2 leagues. One with my boyfriend, which is very high stakes, and then one with my TYT crew, which I'm very excited about.
Have you ever done fantasy basketball?
No, I haven't. It's such a commitment, though. Like, same with fantasy hockey and baseball. Baseball's another level, but...
I did it 1 year, and it was actually Giannis's rookie year, and I had Giannis on my team, and he was really good for me because it was a league that counted double-doubles, and Giannis was... easy. It was just racking those up towards the end of his rookie.
I've done daily fantasy on DraftKings with fantasy basketball.
I want to be clear that I don't have any political opposition to watching sports. I just find it boring mostly. But if I don't play fantasy, but if any of the viewers want to, get schooled in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, feel free to DM me at any point in time.
Do you have a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards? I sold them to a boy I liked for like $20, and now, along with my Pokemon cards, at some point in like 4th grade, I realized they would have been worth hundreds at this point.
Pokemon cards. I had an original shiny Charizard that I lost as a child, actually. So that's. I mean, when you're like what? 10, you can't expect that it will one day be worth like trillions of dollars. But
wait, are those ones going for a lot nowadays? The shiny Charizards?
First edition, yes, absolutely.
I might have one of those. I have to crack out the I don't even know where it is, but I hit somewhere.
I spent so much of my lawn mowing and allowance money on just taking it straight to the trading card shop. Just right there, get me 2 packs, basically $20. You can get about 2 packs at those days, and kind of be disappointed in the I think maybe why I hate speculation so much is, I mean, I had a decent collection. I had like 40 Michael Jordan cards and stuff like that, all with the expectation that I was going to sell these at some point in the future, because my dad had told me stories about how, his baseball cards, and he wished he did, right? And I still have a lot of those cards, and I don't know, I kind of feel like if my mom wants to go through the work of selling them, she can have the money.
Yeah.
I play digitally. I think it's a money sink otherwise.
I have an old guitar I gotta sell too. It's like, anyway, the process of selling is really annoying, but I think it's worth it, but I'm not exactly sure at this point. Bro Jogan, What is this anti-masker even saying with the diaper thing? Is he saying he would prefer someone farts near his face without a diaper at all? What about a room full of people farting? He might as well go as far as to cover his nose with his hand if the smell was too strong. Perhaps some types of face covering or mask would help him in that situation.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is he's very angry, but the only way you can really escape the rationality of this stuff is to make it a joke. So you call it like the jokey pokey, like these sort of things, or you're wearing a diaper on your mask as you're insanely angry and literally threatening violence, or towing up to the line of threatening violence. You have to throw in it's like a diaper on your face,
right?
Because actually, what it is a mechanism to stop the spread of a virus.
I like the propaganda photos you see where they have like the kid wearing the mask and then they take the mask off and the kid has like a duct tape over their mouth and it just says like silence on the duct tape, and it's just like, you'll never know if they're being kidnapped, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Emma, hope you had a good night last night in your childhood home. Thank you. What are your way too early AFC NFC championship predictions for me? Titans v Bills, Packers v Rams. My hot take is I don't know if the Titans even make the playoffs this year. I think Packers v Rams is a good choice. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. Fuck. Damn it. All right, and now I feel bad talking too much about sports. Haircut hippie, would you make those frames a different color? Black would be better. Okay. Nerd cheated. Conservative men are very insecure and smart women threaten them. When they are beautiful, it hurts them worse.
It doesn't say anything about gnome, but anyway.
Tim Caucus. I'm a big fan, but I need to say I don't really follow sports. That's it, though. No critique. I'm enjoying commentary from a left perspective. Okay, cool.
Oh, incidentally, Gnome's Attorney General Ravensburg, who hit a guy on the side of the road in South Dakota a few months ago, got a misdemeanor for that, for I guess distracted driving or something, even though the guy's he left the scene of the accident saying he assumed it was a deer, despite the fact that the guy's glasses were in the back seat of his car, having gone through the windshield.
I think I remember the story. Didn't he make a Facebook post about it after it like happened, or not about it specifically, but he was like posting like right after it or something about some event he was leaving?
I think I saw it hit a deer or something like that. And yeah, and there's all these and like Facebook activity and stuff like that. And also a sheriff came out and they said they couldn't find the body. Or any indication that he hit a person. And so he went home and didn't find out until the next morning that there was a body there, despite the fact that the guy was using his cell phone as a flashlight when he was struck and killed, and the cell phone was on in the morning.
Oh my God.
Still. And so when you go out there at night and put the cell phone back with the flashlight on, it's pretty hard to not see the flashlight there. But anyway, guy got off. He's got some severe community service. And also misdemeanor, which is the same kind of charge I have. I'm guilty of a misdemeanor for a loud party. So you hit a guy on the side of the road.
Here in New York or North Dakota?
In North Dakota.
I will also say that now I thought about it a little bit more. I think the Browns will be in the AFC Championship. So for now, I'll say Browns, Bills, Packers, Rams. Okay. Do we want to take one more call and then read some IMs and get out of here?
Do we got time? Don't you let me know.
I've heard that Emma has a show on Peacock right after this that she has to prepare for around 2:20. So I don't know if we have time.
Well,
we can do one quick call, I think.
Let's do one quick call. I ended a little early yesterday, so I don't want to get too loosey-goosey with it.
All right, so let's take this call. 818. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's me, Dave, from Jamaica.
Hey, Dave from Jamaica.
Interesting hearing about Matt's criminal history. But I guess I was going to talk. I think the previous call about the carceral punishment thing ties into what I heard on Left Reckoning when it came to, what was the guest name again?
Chip Gibbons.
Chip Gibson, is that right? Yeah. People have to kind of realize that you don't want to rely on carceral type punishments to get these type of things done. because you have to, as Brendan was saying, due to the nature of the country you live in, and also the nature of who's enforcing the laws. Because even if you have the best written laws, right? Remember, you have a large population. Most of the cops are conservative, and the ones who are not conservative are probably libertarian, right? So that's the enforcement side of the thing. So even with the best written laws, you can imagine how disastrously that will be enforced and what they would turn a blind eye to. But as far as the best tactics to deal with COVID things, as you said, you probably want to mandate going to bars and any place fun. So that level of coercion will work. But if you're going to start locking up people, it's going to end in disaster. Especially, right? It's like it's hard. I don't know how to describe it, because in Jamaica we're currently having a lot of issues with COVID because we have like a 41% positivity rate now, and that's due to vaccine hesitancy and stuff, and because people believe all sorts of dumb conspiracy crap. But even then, I wouldn't propose locking up people because it won't work. So,
yeah.
I guess part of my question is, how do we deal with that? Because I'm kind of throwing up my hands because I've been patient. I use the best arguments I can use. You can shame them. But it seems the anti-vax bug is really stuck in certain people's heads, this weird individuality fixation they're on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the anti-vaxxer bug is, a way for a lot of right-wingers in the media to keep that sort of like Trump aggrievement money coming in, a seamless pivot to like the keep the rage going in people. But I agree with your underlying point that it won't work. But also I think that, as I mentioned before, we have the sort of population that we work towards, and to suddenly sort of, make it illegal to, engage in, let's for lack of a better term, called deviant behavior of anti-vaxxerism, without acknowledging that this behavior was entirely predictable based on the sort of culture we have here, is manifested in the idea of we're going to have a carceral solution to it, because we know exactly why people are behaving the way they are. We just, sort of pretended we would never need them to be able to listen or parse through fact from fiction in any meaningful way. Right. For as long as I've been in media, I think that I've been hearing arguments for whether or not, people should be allowed to craft entire platforms for themselves based on misinformation, based on scientifically misleading information, as long as it's presented in the correct sort of, with the correct sort of symbolic and rhetorical tricks added to make them sort of plausible deniability, under the auspices that, well, they're just playing, or it won't really have any effect. And now we saw how rapidly the sort of need for an ability to get true verifiable information out to the population and have them be able to believe it was just entirely derailed by this media infrastructure we have. And so I just think that ultimately it won't work, because this media infrastructure still exists to keep indoctrinating people to resist any sort of carceral solution, even though we shouldn't have one. But also it lets the people off who were making the most profit off of creating the circumstances that led to the situation that we're in right now, by basically making it the fault of the people who listen to them, who were basically left to decide left to decide fact from fiction by a basic abdication of responsibility from press, from media institutions, from journalists, from the sort of political media establishment generally, because it made them the most money. Right. I think that we're seeing the exact same public health crisis with COVID-19 that we see with gun violence, with domestic violence, with a number of these issues that we sort of sweep away under the rug as a result of just individual choice. But now that people's individual choices are much more readily, apparently deleterious societally, people are wondering, well, how do we end up here, and how do we fix it immediately? And the answer is like, well, there's no way to fix it immediately, but perhaps we can start, digging ourselves out of this hole that we created, basically to facilitate a bunch of people getting rich.
Right.
But I guess another thing I'm worried about, because I'm seeing it happen, because we saw it with some of the previous IMs a few days ago, Matt was talking about it as well, is the conservatives, and I'm talking leadership, right, have kind of made a situation where if this COVID thing continues getting worse, they're going to start developing serious resentments among left in general, like libs and all. In other words, when people start dying because they don't have access to a hospital because it's filled up with unvaccinated COVID people, and that's going to start developing some serious resentments. And I think we're beginning to hear little cracks of it right now, because I don't know what that could evolve in, but I think it could definitely go down some terrible roads, because yes, right-wingers are yelling and screaming, but I think it could lead to serious civil unrest in general, because when you have family members start dying, people's ability to kind of rationally look at it big picture begins to slowly fade away.
Definitely. And also, I just want to jump in here real quickly about another issue with the carceral solution to the problem. Before we go off, like our American prisons are one of the most underreported, are having an underreported surge of COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. So putting, due to our, it's basically terrible prison industrial complex leading to awful standards of living, basically near torturous conditions, lack of basic hygiene protocol. So, adding more people to that situation that is already, it's not though like we vaccinate all our prisoners, doesn't necessarily make sense either. But go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting your question.
No. It's an excellent point you're making. As I say, I'm very hesitant with carceral solutions unless there's like, we have literally no option. But I'm not convinced it would work anyway.
But to your other point about like people blaming the left for a lack of hospital space, honestly,
no. I'm not saying the left bit. I'm sorry. I'm not saying the left is going to get blamed. What I'm seeing from the IMs in general is that I see a lot of libs losing patience with right wingers, and I can see that devolving in a different, a not healthy path as well.
Well, I sorry, sorry for misunderstanding. So sorry for misunderstanding. I think we've seen that from the beginning too, with like people more aligned with Democrats, talking about how they believe science and they're going to get vaccinated the moment it comes out and they're going to be partying next weekend, et cetera, or following the rules of the pandemic to various degrees. At the same time, I think our lack of healthcare infrastructure predates COVID-19. Again, people were complaining about lack of access to healthcare, not just because of lack of access to insurance or maldistribution of resources, but just because they've been closing hospitals in rural areas. They've been privatizing hospitals in urban centers for decades, right? That's another aspect of our sort of healthcare infrastructure being privatized and being used as a slush fund to make money for big hospitals, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies working in that kind of like triangle.
All right, appreciate it, Dave. Thanks so much.
Oh yes, sorry for hogging up so much time, but take care, you guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Always love hearing from you. All right, guys, that was the final call of the day. I'm gonna hang up. I'm gonna hang you up, Matt.
All right, sounds good.
Is that fine?
That's fine.
All right.
I think ultimately
that sounds so satisfying.
Like a lot of this stuff isn't going to be solved by discourse and persuasion. It's going to be solved by people realizing the significance of and severity of pandemics because it affects them personally. Unfortunately, like I always go back to Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin got his publishing start doing anti-vax propaganda against smallpox. He lost his son because of it, and then he regretted doing that. And ultimately, I think like until people see, like I just say this in North Dakota because North Dakota hasn't been as affected by COVID. It's harder to get through to people who don't know anybody who
died
or only know like one person sort of tangentially. Once that starts changing, I think it changes attitudes.
All right, just a few more IMs, then we'll get out of here. I've been telling all my Dave 4133. I've been telling all my conservative friends that anti-vaccine bullshit is simply a liberal ploy to minimize the GOP voter base. I think,
and that's one way to do it.
That's pretty funny. I think this is the direction we need to go. And go Birds and Emma enjoy watching Jalen Hurts become MVP. Right, that's why they're interested in Deshaun Watson, because they believe in Jalen Hurts. Illuminati kids. So as far as COVID goes, with any consequences off the table, sounds like there's nothing we can do to solve it. Well, I don't know.
I mean, I think it depends on your definition of solve. I think I agree
Right.
kind of with Matt that like at a certain point, the most convincing thing to most people is going to have to be like them personally experiencing it, because that's what they've been taught by our, reactionary media that it takes to learn, right? Until you personally experience something, you can't necessarily understand, or, you shouldn't take it seriously, a la racism or, sexism, et cetera. Like, it's been a way to divide us by preventing empathy. And unfortunately, I think the question has been like, how do we fix this problem tomorrow that we've been, stoking for decades? And the answer is we probably can't until it starts directly impacting people and makes them, more susceptible to listening to, alternative narratives. I think some people just have to see their material conditions change before they will listen to sort of rhetoric.
All right. Final IM of the day. Matt Binder's Shiny Charizard. It's a lot. A lot of the market for collectibles is very similar to Bitcoin. Lots of people selling stuff to each other at increasing prices to hype it up. Big deal right now in retro video game collecting. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for watching. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want. But I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in. And my pilot lights shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you?